This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here for the support. My name is Thuha Kerber, and I'm going to present my capstone project. It's named iGDELT, and I'll explain the name in a little bit. But before I start, I would like to thank Siobhan and the staff at Divergence for putting together a very comprehensive course. I couldn't have done this project by myself, dabbling in online courses for machine learning and things like that. So thank you for the practical knowledge. So what is iGDELT? I'd like to introduce the agenda so we know roughly what we're talking about. I'm going to introduce the project, what it's about. I explain my method for training my machine learning model. I explain how to run, deploy and run the project, and then what I could have done if I had more time. So what is iGDELT? It's a personalized news feed using web scraping and NLP, natural language processing machine learning model. I use GDELT as a data source, hence the name iGDELT, very creative right now. And I'll explain GDELT in a little bit too. The motivation is to help professionals keep up with relevant news near real time without having to go to another app or clicking through and swiping through many screens. There's many news apps out there. You can download News 360, Feedly, that you can personalize your news feed, but you have to download the app. You have to wipe through so many screens to see the headlines and things like that. Those are not very useful for me, although I use them from time to time. The intention of the project is to also use a global source that go beyond the focus of the Western and speaking English media. I want to explore news from Africa, from Asia, and countries like that we don't generally get exposed to. What are the features of my project? The news is delivered to a widely used messaging app. In this case, is Slack. I chose Slack because it's a app that I constantly on for my job. Frequent delivery cadence allows users to keep up news near real time. What does it mean? The news feed is delivered to you every 15 minutes. You can change it, but right now it's hard coded to 15 minutes frequency. Efficient presentation, basically I just send it to the Slack channel, and it has a title that you can click on it and see the news if it interests you. The iGDELT project is containerized, so it is delivered as a Docker container. And if you are not familiar with Docker, it is similar to a VM, a virtual machine, but a lot more lightweight. It's OS independent. You can run it everywhere. It's very easy to deploy and run. I also provide an easy to train method to customize the machine learning models for your own newsfeed. Okay. The data source, GDELT has always been a fascination of mine ever since I got exposed to it. It is a global database of events, language, and tone. That's what it stands for. And I just put some excerpts from the GDELT project website. It monitors the world's news media from nearly every corner of every country in print, broadcast, and web formats in over 100 languages every moment of every day. It is a massive database. It is developed to enable research in human society and things like that. It also has a global an open data global graph. It's reaching not only the events, they call it events, it's basically articles, but also the emotions around the events. So they have a lot of opinion pieces, blog posts, and things like that. The global reach, it's, like I said, it's everywhere in the world, Africa, Asia, countries that we don't normally read about in news anyway. The historical breadth, it's archived back from January 1 of 1979. And it updates every 15 minutes. The translation, the news from other languages are automatically translated into English and archived. My project uses a very, very small subset of GDELT, which is just the latest event file. So every 15 minutes, GDELT put out an Excel spreadsheet of all the news out there that they accumulated. So that's a very small subset of what I use. And it has information about people, organizations, locations, and all I use is the URL of the article. So very small subset of it. And just to give you the scale of GDELT, every 15 minutes, a file would contain about 2,000 to 3,000 articles. A year of data has about 3 terabytes of data last year. So it's a huge, huge data graph. It is powered by Google Big Data Engine. If you want to go read about it, this link right here will take you to the GDELT project. If I can just click on it quickly so you can see it's coming up. It is an impressive project. So it has a graph. This is not real time, but it has a graph like this that basically pop up, light up what the events happen, and they will monitor non-peaceful events like riots, terrorist attacks, and things like that as well. It is very fascinating. Anyway.
And how long have you been following?
I have been involved in projects that use GDELT for 3 years now, sir. Okay, before I get to how I train my machine learning model, I would like to introduce my GitHub. This is the GitHub repository of all my project files. Yeah, I just had a few files, but the main one is two Jupyter notebooks. The first one is to build the machine learning model itself, this build model, IPYNB. And then the second one is this iGDELT Jupyter notebook to actually run the project and then apply the machine learning model. I'll go back to these in a little bit. And the Docker files is just basically to set up the Docker container. The rest is just extra stuff that you don't need to know about if you are the user of this. So to go back to how I train this model, I only use a very minimal information. It's basically the URL of the article, and whether it's 0 is the news that I'm not interested in, and 1 are the ones I'm interested in. Even gathering this was a time-intensive process. So I take the latest GDELT event file, whatever it was at the time, probably 4 or 5 weeks ago. I started early. And then I go through and reading just the title of the URL, I'm able to say 0, 1 quickly. But my problem was I had so many 1s and not enough 0s. So I have to go through another event file, go through that. And it takes too long because every time is 3,000, lines items. So in the next 2 weeks, basically, I go online and search for news I like, and then copy the URL back into my training data and then classify it. So the null accuracy that I started out with was like 20%. And I just keep increasing the amount of training data until I get the null accuracy of 80. And by that time, I got so many events that I actually don't need. So I filter them out to just 2,000 events. And by events, I mean articles again. The one that I classify as positive are basically technology news with the focus on big technology companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, news about gadgets, and then artificial intelligence and machine learning. And also I put some focus on the science news with space and climate change. Like I mentioned, this build model, Jupyter notebook, is where I clean, I rank all the data, and then I train it as a safe model. What it does is it's going through my training data, and let me show you what my training data look like. It's basically just have 2 columns. My news, 0, 1, and then URL. The text column is downloaded by that Jupyter notebook itself. So it will go through every line of the URL, download the text via Beautiful Soup, and then put it here, and then use it to train. So if you add new, this allow me, and I save it back into the training data. So if I have more data, I can just add like another line here with the URL, and when I run that Jupyter notebook, it will go through and download the text of those that haven't been downloaded. So I save time that way. So the model accuracy is 96%. And then I save the model as a pickle file. And before I go on, I would like to show you what it looks like really quick. So this is my Jupyter notebook to build a model. I read it into the data frame, and then I converted the columns. Of course, for some reason, when I read it in, is using the classification as string instead of integer. So I have to convert it in, and then just basically web scraping it. I go through all the lines in the data frame and see if the text is not downloaded, I downloaded text. So there's some function that does that. And then I have to drop the lines that I cannot download the text for. So basically a little bit of cleaning. At the beginning, I was trying to see if I can create more features out of this data set by, is it the article length or is it, something. And these are just the experiments that I did and I left in here, but it's not really needed. This is my distribution. The positive is 20% and the negative news are 80%. Can I find any? There's no correlation between the length of the text to the classification. So this is just the process of going through and build my initial models. I started out, so since I have to run this multiple times to find the best model, I started out with a very, negative score. Basically, score is my accuracy. And it is configured in this config.yaml. So I read. So later on, I will show how you can train your model by changing this configuration. But once I train, basically just go through. This is my function to evaluate the cross-validation score of the model. And then this is my first model is 95%. Well, this is going through multiple iterations, but this is the stat for my current model. And if I use the stop words, it's increased to 96%. And I tried different, experiments with different models, with the n-grams and a different vectorizer for natural language processing. Different models, such as native Bayes instead of native Bayes instead of what I use up here, logistic regression. And this is the gist of it. So my final precision and recall is 91% and 84% respectively. I care more about precision in this case just because I don't want the wrong news delivered to my channel. I don't care so much about the news that I miss, as long as it's low enough. So this number was important to me. Like I said, the overall accuracy is 96%, but my precision is actually 91% for the positive news. And this is where I saved the prediction probability to the disk, so that the initial process of training my model, I have to go through and see if I misclassify something. So these are basically why is what the machine, what I classify, why predict is what the machine classify. And I want to see why there's some false positives here. Like if you look at some of this, I look at this, and then sometimes I have to click on it to see what's wrong. But Japan to step up scrutiny of foreign investment in technology. Well, it has technology in it, but I classify it as 0 because it's a small, more politics content than technology content. So it's one of those cases where I decided to leave it alone. But if it was my fault, that I would change it to 1, for example, in my original training data and train it again. So I went through multiple routes of this as well.
So you use that as a feedback?
Yes.
So okay, and go back and
Yes,
fix.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Next step is just basically save model to disk. I do have a check in there to see if the current score is better than my baseline score. Every time it runs, it writes a baseline score into my configuration. If the model score is better, I will save that model. Otherwise, I don't save it. So that's where my check comes in. And then to test it, I reload it and then run my model again to make sure I can, retrieve it from disk. So that's how I train my model. Any questions before I start?
So this Docker, where is that running? Is it locally on your laptop?
It is locally.
Okay.
And I will show you in a minute. So like I said, I took about 2.5 weeks to train the provided model. Most of it is just basically gathering data, which you all know, you've been through, that gathering data is the most intensive part. How to train your own model to do this. Like I said, I have config.yaml, and it's very, very simple. All it does, go back. If you just ignore the output part, which I'll explain later, all it does is it record the baseline score, which is the best score of all your runs currently. If this is your first time running this model, I would just leave it blank. And then set right here, leave it empty as your first time. And then it will, the first time it runs, it will record whatever the score is on this. And then you keep adding data until the score is what you like. And then you populate 2 columns in my training data spreadsheet, the URL, and whether or not it's your news. And then you just run that Jupyter notebook. And then you keep running and adding data until you're satisfied with your model, whatever that is. Any questions? How I implemented the iGDELT itself. So now I have a model. I really have to go through and download the news every 15 minutes and then, you know, apply my model to it and then send it to my Slack channel. So I obviously have a schedule to run it every 15 minutes, and that's part of a Docker container. If you don't run it as Docker, you have to configure that yourself. I do have instruction in the README to do it on Windows or Linux. But if you configure it to run as Docker, it will be automatically configured for you. You don't have to do anything. My iGDELT Jupyter notebook does the following. It downloads the latest event file from GDELT. It parses it into a data frame, and it retrieves the title and content. It runs the pre-trained model on it, and then it delivers the positive events to whatever my destination is. So without further ado, I'd like to show you what it looks like. This is an experiment that turned out to be working really well for me. So I kept it. I downloaded the latest event GDELT file using Bash script instead of Python. I could do this in Python as well, but it was like, well, I just want to, you know, this is easy and it works right now. So why change? I'd rather spend my time focusing on better things for my project. So obviously, I did not know that you can run Bash script inside Jupyter Notebook, but you could. So what it does is just go to this URL right here. This is where you can retrieve the latest GDELT event file and download it. Unzip it, it's come as a zip file. If you unzip it, it's an Excel spreadsheet inside it. So I parse it into a data frame. I retrieve. It's very similar to the build model in this case. And then I do have function to check whether or not the text I receive is good enough. So HTML page, if you hit it, it has a code, an HTTP code, whether or not it's a good response or not. So I do check that. This is just error handling to make sure that my model is fault tolerant. And then I retrieve, and this is just some text to print out for my debugging purpose. There is some data filtering here. You know, you have to remove events that we can't download the text for because I can't classify on it. There's a lot of duplicate titles as well. So, you know, usually the news companies will print articles from another news company. And usually you have duplicate titles, and I don't want to receive, you know, duplicate articles in the same feed. So I remove that as well. It's something I learned. And then I just load the pickle file and then run it on my model. And then the last thing to do is to deliver it. So the config, if we go back to this, it's basically where you can configure where your Slack channel is. Right now it is configured to deliver to my Slack channel, my own personal Slack channel, but I do have instruction on my README, and within this too, if you click here and follow it, you can configure your own Slack channel to receive this as well. It's very simple. It's very simple to do. It literally takes a minute, and I extract out my positive events and then send it for to the channel. And this is just the code to send to channel. I'm not going to go through it. I also output the results to JSON and HTML. As a software engineer, I always think about what I can do with the output. HTML, you can probably embed it in your own custom HTML page doing some fancy formatting if you want. And if you don't want that, we have JSON output that you can parse out and present it however you like. But that was it. It's very simple. It's that. This is just more details that I already touched. You can configure your delivery options in config.yaml. And then it's best to run iGDELT as a Docker container because you can run it on Windows, Mac. I don't know if it's run on Raspberry Pi, but I hope so. I've never tried. Everything is packaged and automatically set up for you. All you have to do is run these 2 steps. First of all, you build a Docker image. And if you download my GitHub repository, you just have to run this. Oops, I'm sorry. This Docker build command, which basically just build an image, and then you run the Docker container with Docker run. And I can show you how it's running. So Docker PS is basically just show all the running Docker containers in my machine, on my local machine. And right now you say iGDELT is the image that I built, and this is the container name, which is just the ID, Docker generated. I created the image 3 weeks ago, and my container has been running for 2 days now. Every time I close it, it doesn't do anything, but every time I open my laptop and do something, it will automatically run in the background. And what it does is it delivers news to my Slack channel. So once in a while, I will get a pop-up like this. And here's all the news that I've been receiving. And you see a lot more news during the week than during the weekend. So this is on Friday. These are some of the news. Let's say this is using GMT time, because when you build a Docker, you can configure that, but I didn't really bother. Sorry. But the time right here is the real time. So every 15 minutes is at 4:38. This is 4:52. Every 15 minutes, I got a feed delivered to my Slack channel right here. And some of it, and the amount of news is still a lot. But what's really great for me is I can just glance at the titles and see what's happening, and then click on the articles that I want to read more about. Like I would like to show you some of the things I received from South Africa, for example, that I saw earlier today. It was really interesting. So you got news from Israeli news, and then I wish I can see it.
Search.
Thank you.
Saw the death of Curve TVs in South Africa in the headline.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. I was like, that's interesting. I didn't know Curve TVs, like, because I don't even have a Curve TV here. So I read something from the Philippines Times or something like that about how talent is the new, no, I'm sorry, resource is the new riches and oil is the, it was very interesting. It's just an opinion piece where he argued that before where if you own slaves, you get rich. If you own land, you get rich. And right now, what company or what country owns the most talent, that country is going to dominate, because talent is now the new thing. And he compared the talent in the U.S. versus China versus India, and how the Philippines can do something about it. It was very fascinating. Like he put out some statistics such as the U.S. has about 400,000 STEM graduates every year versus 4 million in China versus 2 million in India. But he also argued that the U.S. papers and research are still cited the most, which indicates the quality is more here versus the quantity over there. Yeah, it was a really good read, and I wouldn't have gotten it if I don't have this, because I wouldn't look at Philippines newspaper. So I got once in a while Slack render the URL. I don't know what the algorithm is. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But there's a lot of 5G news lately. Huawei makes the news a lot with the ban and things like that. So like just glancing at this, just give me a much better overall view of what's going on technology-wise. Okay. Oh, and I want to talk about the APIs. Like I said, it produces JSON and HTML output. And to see that, the Docker container has this exposes port 5000. Now, Flask, I use Flask API for this. Flask default port is 5000, but Docker port can be anything. I just map 5000 to 5000 to be straightforward. So every 15 minutes, you can, refresh it. And if you want a JSON API, for example, this is the JSON format, right? It has the title and what the URL is, and you can render it however you like. And it changes, like I said, every time it runs. If I have a lot of time, I would, obviously right now it does every 15 minutes. Well, I want, it can run for 15 minutes. I don't want it to deliver to me like for every hour, so maybe half a day or something, whenever I have time, for example. Right now, there is no way to configure that. I would like to be able to configure that, and that should be pretty simple if time is not a question. And make training new model more user-friendly. Right now, you obviously have to know a little bit about how to run Jupyter Notebook. But if I can just make an API to take, like, people just say, hey, just enter URL, and this is my news, this is not my news, for example, and then take it in and train it itself, it will be great. So the user doesn't need to have any technical knowledge about Jupyter Notebook, about anything. They can just enter basically an Excel spreadsheet. And continuously retrain a model based on the user feedback. If I have some sort of API to tell, oh, this is not really my news, I'm not interested in this, for example, it should be able to take that feedback and then retrain a model to take that into account. Like, for example, later on, things change. I don't want to hear news about Facebook anymore, or things like that. I should be able to train that without having to go back and manually doing something. Or use a neural network model that does that for you. I don't know if there's one out there. I'm sure there is. And it would be great to support additional delivery, like HipChat or WhatsApp. Like I said, I think it's very doable. It's very simple, just like Slack, but but it's not supported right now. And make more use of the GDELT data. Like I show you, it's just a wealth of information with people, organization. You can filter by people, for example, you can filter by location to say, I want to hear news from Vietnam. That's where I'm from, right? I could probably do that if I use the location information from GDELT. And the historical archive. Like right now, we only get the latest events. But let's say I want to hear the news from like 1970, before I was born, about some event. I should be able to search for that. It'd be great. And that is it for my project. Any questions?
I'm curious, what are the most common false positives that come into your feed?
I can give you a great example for that. A couple of weeks ago, there's an Amazon fire. And that came constantly into my news feed because I trained Amazon, the company, as my positive news, but Amazon, the rainforest fire, has nothing to do with it. Things like that. See what else? Climate change. I'm interested in, Greenland melting, but there's a lot of protests and stuff like that out there, which I don't really, well, I care, but not that much. I don't want to see it every 15 minutes. I have yet to find a way to separate those two, or maybe I just need more data, but I haven't done that.
So you mean it's like an association, like the topic, but not the topic connected to politics?
Yes.
The topic of
Yes.
isolation.
I need to be a lot more selective about my training data, I suspect, to make that happen. Yes.
So currently the model that you're using, is it parsing the article and
Yes.
then breaking down the words and doing like what are the words,
Yes,
like the word count?
exact.
Okay.
It's not the word count. It's I use count vectorizer, the very basic model of the vectorizer. So it breaks out a word and then it put weights into certain words. I don't know, but just based on my training data, it put certain weights in words. I'm sure Amazon has a really heavy weight. That's why the Amazon forest came to me. But yeah.
So you do that for the actual content of the article?
I did, yeah, I scraped not the title, but just the content. So if you download a HTML page, it has the P tag, the A tag. I only collect the P tags, which is the body, the actual text of the article.
Okay. And you were labeling everything that was technology related as a one?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Technology and science, yes.
Technology and science.
Or just certain kind of science. Like I wouldn't get news about I don't know, maybe biology or some agriculture news. I get news about climate change and space. Like I get a lot of news about NASA and with the moon, go back to the moon stuff. So I got a lot of news from that.
And that actually determined then what you fed to your Slack channel based on this, or did you filter based on the way that you labeled these, or did you just accept everything coming in and just made a prediction based on the content? How did you decide that?
So at the beginning, when I trained my model, I just gather the news I'm interested in, and then after that, I just basically run the models and have it delivered to my Slack. Does that answer your question?
I think so. What I'm specifically asking is now, what is delivered to your Slack? Is it specifically science and technology
Yes.
only? That's what I'm
Yes.
asking.
Yes. And that's very specific to me. It's my project, but you can obviously take it and train your own model to do whatever you like.
And Thuha, what was your, if you were to redo this entire project,
Yes, sir.
how would you do it?
If I have to redo this entire project,
Yes.
I don't know if I would do anything differently. I would add more to it. Honestly, it's been very useful to me. And I use it, like I said, every day. Every time I log onto my computer, I see news. I would put more time into continuously training my model.
Okay. The feedback loop.
Yes, create an API to say, well, this is not really my news, for example, and then have the model retrained.
Got it. Got it. All right. So you have an opportunity to look at reinforcement learning.
Mm-hmm.
So having an agent that does the axon that we have on your behalf,
Okay.
takes user input and triggers an action. So the whole reinforcement learning process. Transfer learning. So your learning is applicable to other scenarios out of this. So transfer learning and reinforcement learning are a couple of opportunities to kind of take the next level.
Okay.
Still NLP, but NLP with reinforcement learning and NLP with transfer learning. I would leave it at that.
Yep.
And for your future projects, whenever you decide to get back to iGDELT, you have an opportunity to kind of try those approaches.
Thank you for putting those vocabularies up, because I wouldn't think of it as called reinforcement learning. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Thank you.